Reformation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros, and keep on going. Lord God of Easter and infrequent spring, thaw our wintry hearts. Announce the large covenant to deceitful lands. Drive the sweet liquor through our parched veins. Stir the vacant eyes with green explosions and gold in azure sky. Smite the pall of death that hangs like desire. Lure us to fresh schemes of life. Rouse us from tiredness, self-pity. Whet us for use. Fire us with good passion. Rekindle thy church. Restore in us the love of living. Bind us to fear and hope again, as we thank with brief thanksgiving, whatever odds may be, that life goes on living, that the dead rise up ever, that even the weariest river winds back to springs under sea. That says it all. Opening words. Do not come to be talked out of the urgency you feel pressing upon your life, or to try to ignore this rising rhythm in your chest, calling you to become brave.
Come instead for courage, for clarity, and companions, friends who will hear the beginning beat and start dancing along. Come to praise the waking up, to promise to keep going. Come to rage on purpose and to grieve in public.
Come to call for a new world built on the seeds of beauty that we scatter everywhere.
For after the marching comes the music and the marking of time and the claiming of this moment with an eye on the long arc of history and the good work that remains just ours to do.
Like the crocuses and the small green buds bursting on brown limbs everywhere, let us come in that we might come alive again, giving thanks for this warm sun and bright hope of being on this path together. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning. Welcome to the First Parish in Bedford. Welcome to early signs of spring and new life, to bunny rabbits in our yards, chocolate eggs and baskets, to the Zoroastrian new day, the Christian empty tomb, and glad miraculous news. Happy Easter, Chag Sameach. Whatever you are celebrating, you are welcome here. Truly, it is great to see some of you, most of you, in your Easter finery, those bright hats. It's good to get a little color in this building, right, after the long, dark winter. We gather this morning, as on all Sunday mornings, in the spirit of love and service toward building a more just and peaceful world. I'm Lisa Perry Wood. I'm the acting parish minister alongside Senior Minister John Gibbons. Here in this place, we welcome and celebrate all of our glorious human diversity: age, race, economic status, varying abilities, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious and political beliefs. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation, guided by love, living out our faith, united by shared values of respect for life, compassion, justice, and peace. Whether you are brand new today or have been coming here all of your lives, you are most welcome. Here on the chancel, you'll see the historic First Parish Communion silver. Later this week, it will be returned to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, but please feel free after the service to come up and take a close look. Pick it up and handle it. It is meant to be used and enjoyed. Also, we want to mention our membership book for those who wish to sign it, which is available in the office on all days of the week. As John says, if you sign it, you can be included in the class of 2018. It will be available all this week and next through April 15th, the Sunday when we will celebrate new members. Following the service, please join us for fellowship and coffee in the common room right behind me. Stop by the welcome table on your way if you'd like to learn more about us or tell us more about you. You can also fill out a blue connection card in the pew during the service if you'd like to stay in touch with what goes on here. And finally, in the back of your order of service, I call your attention to the announcements section. And please note that today we have an 11 o'clock family service with the children's choir singing, and you are welcome to stay and join us for that as well. So, that's our service, folks. Thanks for coming. April Fools! Welcome, one and all.
So I get to introduce the middle hymn, but before I do that, if you have on an Easter bonnet, can you stand up? Stand up. Okay? John, stand up. Come up here for a second. John makes fun of everyone who wears an Easter bonnet every year. John, this is for you. So thanks, everybody. So for the middle hymn, in honor of Passover, we're doing Shalom Chavarim. So let's stand up. And it's in your bulletin. The words are in your bulletin. You'll sing it in Hebrew, well, whatever. It's 9:20 people. Sing it in Hebrew first, then you'll sing it in English, and then the choir has a little postlude to that. You can either clap along or hum along or do whatever or try to keep up. We're just here to celebrate Passover this morning.
I'm glad you're all here. I almost missed this morning because I forgot that we had a 9 o'clock service. I'm remembering when we first had 2 services. On the very first 9 o'clock in the morning service, one of our ushers was Ron Cordes, and he came wearing his bathrobe and slippers. And it was kind of you to get your bonnets on and to get dressed up for this. I've chosen two resurrection readings that are both by the same author, an unusual poet named Brian Doyle. And the first piece is titled, "Could There Be a Badger Jesus?" You want to hear a resurrection story? I'll tell you a resurrection story. I saw a squirrel get squished in the street. This was on Ash Street, near where a family named Penance lives. Things like this rivet me. Religions don't live in churches. Religions are not about religion. In the end, they're vocabularies. This squirrel got hammered. I mean, a car ran right over it, and the car sped down the hill, and I recall thinking that some dog would soon be delighted to be rolling ecstatically in squirrel oil. But then, even as I watched, the animal resumed its original shape and staggered off into the laurel thicket, inarguably alive and mobile, if somewhat rattled and unkempt. Jesus and Lazarus must have known that feeling of being sore in every joint and utterly, totally fixated on a shower and coffee and a sandwich, or walnuts, depending, I suppose, on species. Our current form is a nebulous idea, is what I am trying to say. Could it be that resurrections are normal, and the one we're always going on about in the Christian mythologies is only one, a long time ago, when there are millions per day? Could there be an insect Jesus and a badger Jesus and a salmon Jesus? Could there be impossible zillions of Jesuses? Isn't that really the whole point? And here another resurrection story from a book by Brian Doyle titled Sweeney's. 40 summers later, it still sits in his drawer. It is now almost more holes than shirt, but it means everything to him. It was given to him by his quiet, tall, older brother who was and remains his hero. He remembers the day his brother gave it to him. "Really? For me?" he gaped. His brother nodded. It was his older brother's college shirt, earned while playing football for Sweeney's, a pub in the town where his brother went to college. Sweeney's closed a long time ago. This may well be the last Sweeney's shirt in existence. Just an old torn jersey to most, but not to him. He writes, "I'll always have his shirt in a drawer. If I touch it, here he is in the room with me, smiling at how a shirt can make a kid speechless with astonished joy, even 40 years later. Isn't that amazing? We hardly ever say how amazing it is that you can freeze time and reverse it and make it caper and spin it back to anywhere, anyone you used to be. Isn't that amazing? A snatch of song, a scent, a battered collar, a ratty old pub jersey. So many time machines. Yes, time wins. My brother withered and vanished, yet here he sits on the edge of the bed, snickering at me as the shirt hangs way down past my knees. No religion owns resurrections. No religion owns resurrections. And now, as an introduction to you-know-what, these words you've heard before from Annie Dillard. She wrote these words talking about the process of creative writing, but they also serve as an appropriate introduction to you-know-what. One of the few things I know about writing is this: spend it all. Shoot it, play it, lose it, all right away, every time. Do not hoard what seems good for a later place in the book or for another book. Give it all. Give it. Give it now. The impulse to save something good for a better place is the signal to spend it now. Something more will arise for later, something better. These things fill from behind, from beneath, like well water. Similarly, the impulse to keep to yourself what you have learned is not only shameful, it is destructive. Anything you do not give freely and abundantly becomes lost to you. You open your safe and find ashes. You wouldn't want that to happen, would you? Freely we have received, freely give for the good work of this congregation within and far, far beyond these walls. Our offering will now gratefully be received. You know what's next.
Oh
A week ago, I was on a panel at Carlton Willard Village where 4 members of the clergy were asked their perspective on life after death, the afterlife. Their chaplain prefaced things by recalling the ancient origins of such beliefs among the Babylonians and Egyptians, and then one after another we heard from Temple Shalom Ameth's Rabbi Susan Abramson, representing Jewish tradition, and then the Catholic perspective from St. Michael's Monsignor Cuddy, and then Imam Shakil Miah from the Islamic Center in Burlington spoke, and I was there to represent Unitarian Universalism. This morning, I'll share some of what I had to say on this topic, though the rabbi and I very nearly could have traded scripts. Judaism and Unitarian Universalism are very this-worldly traditions, and both are virtually silent about the afterlife. I am somewhat envious, though, of Jewish rituals. Sitting Shiva at home, for example, when the mourner's sole responsibility is not to greet or entertain, but to mourn. Family members are to pay no attention to their own appearance, and thus mirrors are covered. At the cemetery, when a body is buried, Jewish families shovel the dirt, but the shovels are held upside down to symbolize the reluctance of the living to let go of the dead. A torn piece of fabric may be worn on one's lapel long after a death to remind others and oneself of the loss. Yahrzeit candles may be lit on the anniversary of a death. Judaism has many rich and meaningful rituals and traditions. For his part, the Monsignor spoke of Catholic doctrines of heaven and hell and purgatory, and it was all, to me at least, a bit wordy and rather theoretical. Although my ears perked up when he got into some speculation as to whether there are any doorknobs in hell. I think he believes that there are no doorknobs. I just had never thought about that. For rich and energetic speculation, however, Imam Shakil was the best of all of us. He is young, in his 20s, a fast-talking New Yorker. He apologized for this at the outset, upbeat and cheerful, but my, oh my, does he know a lot of details about the afterlife. The afterlife begins with a trumpet blast that wakes the dead from their graves, and then comes the perspiration when humans, animals, angels, and devils sweat unshaded from the sun. Sinners and unbelievers will suffer and sweat longer on this day, which lasts for 50,000 years. God will then judge, accept no excuses, examine every act and intention, and some will go to heaven, others to hell, and finally the souls will travel over hellfire on a bridge that for sinners will be thinner than hair. This is the bridge, thinner than hair and sharper than the sharpest sword. And well, Shakil had a lot more details, but I especially enjoyed his ecstatic description of heaven and its infinite pleasures. There is much more than I have time to tell, but the pomegranates, Shakil said, the pomegranates, he was almost delirious. The pomegranates are so infinitely superior to the pomegranates on earth they are to die for. Well, Unitarian Universalism, I'm sorry to say, cannot compete with the pomegranates in heaven. And so I'll now tell you some of what I said, but by comparison, it's really boring. I'll be brief. First, a little history. While our tradition has evolved and continues to evolve and is no longer exclusively or even primarily Christian, Unitarian Universalists got our start on the losing, this worldly side of two big Christian arguments. The earliest Unitarians looked to the life and teachings of Jesus as those of a moral and ethical prophet and exemplar. Jesus was considered a human being and a man, not as the Son of God or as the resurrected Savior. At the Council of Nicaea in the year 325, this humanist view of Jesus was declared a heresy. The Universalist heresy, the wrong side of the argument that they picked, was to deny that there was any such place or condition as hell except that which we create for ourselves here on earth, and that a loving God would never banish any human being into utter darkness. God is love. I read in this morning's paper as I was wasting time thinking I had all the morning before church would start, there was an article in this morning's paper about the Pope having said to an interviewer that there actually is no hell, or so the interviewer reported, and the Vatican was scrambling to cover up for what the Pope perhaps had said. The Pope said that a loving God would not create a hell. Well, times change. And so you see, Unitarian Universalists are descended from a long line of heretics. The very word heresy, by the way, derives from Greek roots meaning I choose. Unitarian Universalism is a chosen faith, not a revealed faith. We are an example of natural religion or natural theology, meaning that we do not depend on revelation or any conception of the supernatural. We have no dogma or universal creed, but instead believe that what is meaningful about life may be known through the observation and experience of nature and the natural world. If God is meaningful to a Unitarian Universalist, and UUs need not be and often are not theists, but if a God is meaningful, that God will be known through our relationships with one another and with all living things, and through our experience of the natural world. Therefore, ours is a very this-worldly faith, and while any individual's belief or conception of the afterlife is respected, we tend to be less concerned about whether there is life after death and more concerned as to whether there is life after birth. Benjamin Franklin was not a Unitarian, but he was a deist with whom we have much in common. And Franklin once said, there are many people who die at the age of 25, but who are not buried until they are much, much older, 75 or 85 or 95. He was concerned that there be life after birth. In the late 19th century, there was a Unitarian catechism written by James Freeman Clarke. A catechism, is a set of religious questions and their official answers. And I'm not sure if he was trying to be humorous or just factual when he posed the question, where do the dead go when they die? And the approved answer in his catechism to the question of where do the dead go when they die, his answer was, and I quote, not very far. A snarky answer. In the steeple of First Parish, there is a bell, and on that bell is inscribed this quotation: "To live in the hearts we leave behind is not to die." That is also inscribed on a rock in our memorial garden outside, where many have chosen to bury the ashes of their loved ones. Living in the hearts we leave behind is a very Unitarian Universalist conception of immortality. That is our hope. And if there is a single commonality among the perspectives expressed by the rabbi, the monsignor, the imam, and me, that commonality is hope. For some, hope abides in other worlds, and for others in this, but no one can live without hope. What do I have to say about hope today? Well, of course, the coming of spring is a hopeful thing. And surely it is hopeful, it is more than hopeful, it is awesome to see so many children and young people lead marches for their lives, for all our lives. So many have been so inspiring, but I really loved it when in the middle of her passionate speech in Washington, D.C., Parkland survivor Samantha Fuentes, overcome by nerves and emotion, choked and threw up in the middle of her speech. Did you see that video? And then, somehow, she managed to laugh and said, "I just threw up on international TV, and I feel great." And she then finished her speech and ended by calling attention to her murdered friend Nicholas Dworet, who would have turned 18 on the day of the march, and she then led the hundreds of thousands in singing "Happy Birthday." That's hope. That may even be resurrection. That we are a sanctuary church is a hopeful thing. With Maria, we live in hope and not in fear. With her, we live in hope that her family may be reunited in safety, and we pray for a resurrection of human decency. And surely it was a hopeful thing this week when a Boston judge acquitted 13 people, including our parishioners Brown Pulliam and Diane Martin, for their civil disobedience in protesting the West Roxbury fracked gas pipeline. For what appears to be the first time anywhere, the judge ruled that their illegal actions were a necessity to put a stop to the greater threat posed by global warming. Remember, too, that their civil disobedience was to lie in pipeline trenches as if dead, in imitation of the anticipatory graves that have been dug in some drought-plagued places in the world, knowing not that deaths have occurred, but knowing that they inevitably will occur if the use of fossil fuels is not diminished. That this week our climate was granted legal standing in court is a hopeful thing and could herald a this-worldly resurrection of our earth. Finally, my thoughts turned to hope this week when I read the obituary of Julie Yip Williams, who died at her home in New York of colon cancer at age 42. Julie Yip Williams wrote a blog about her struggles, but her struggles began when she was born blind in Vietnam from which she and her family escaped in a rickety fishing boat. Her obituary says that she wrestled with hope, which she cursed as an illusory sentiment. She said, "Cancer crushes hope, leaving a wasteland of grief, depression, despair, and a sense of unending futility." But, she added, "Hope is a funny thing. It seems to have a life and will of its own that I cannot control through the sheer force of my mind. It is irrepressible, its very existence inextricably tied to our very spirit, its flame, no matter how weak, not extinguishable." When Julie was born, congenital cataracts caused her blindness, and to her grandmother, the family's matriarch, this meant that she was an unwanted burden with no future. At 2 months, Julie was sent to an herbalist with instructions from her grandmother: kill her. Rejecting the offer of gold, the herbalist refused. Julie was returned home to her angry grandmother. But then her great-grandmother got wind of things and commanded that Julie be left alone. How she was born is how she will be. Julie did not learn any of this, what she called the secret, until after her grandmother died when she was 28 years old. In 1973, Julie and her family escaped Vietnam. We were lucky because our boat did not sink as so many others did. We were lucky because we were not forced to engage in cannibalism as some other refugees were. Well, eventually, Julie went to Williams College, and she graduated from Harvard Law School and became a lawyer. And today, she is survived by her husband, 2 young daughters, her parents, and her brother and sister. In a blog entry, Julie addressed her surviving daughters, saying blunt things about loss and the unfairness of life. "You will be deprived of a mother. I wish I could protect you from the pain. But also, as your mother, I want you to feel the pain, to live it, embrace it, and then learn from it. Be stronger people because of it, for you will know that you carry my strength within you. Be more compassionate people because of it. Empathize with those who suffer in their own ways." And she wrote, "Rejoice in life and all of its beauty because of it. Live with special zest and zeal for me." That is hope and may even be resurrection. We are lucky because we have survived another winter and we now witness another spring. We are lucky because we have not died of gun violence. We are lucky because we have not been deported. We are lucky because we have not died by drought. We are lucky because our boat has not sunk. We are lucky because we have not been cannibals nor been eaten by cannibals. We are lucky because we feel pain. We are lucky because we carry others' strength and compassion and love. We are lucky because it is our opportunity to rejoice in life and all its beauty. May we resonate with this Buddhist evening prayer. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly and opportunity is lost. Awaken, awaken, awaken. Do not squander your life. Pomegranates, it seems to me, are a lot of work. They're all those pesky seeds. Frankly, I hope they're better in heaven. O Day of Light and Gladness. Our hymn is number 270. Let's say our closing words together in unison. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. Salgan al mundo en paz. Tengan valor. Aférense a lo que es bueno. No devuelvan mal por mal. Fortalezcan a los temerosos. Apoyen a los débiles. Ayuden a los que sufren. Honren a todos los seres. Amén.